When you hear about these massive multi-billion-dollar infrastructure projects, it's easy to get lost in the numbers. But what happens when that money just, well, vanishes? Today, we're going to peel back the layers on global corruption. We're going to find out where the money really goes, and more importantly, who gets left holding the bag. So let's dive in.
Okay, I know what you're thinking. That sounds like the setup to a really weird joke, right? But the answer, and I'm serious here, it uncovers this global web of debt, influence, and straight-up exploitation. Trust me, stick with me here, because by the end of this, you'll see the connection, and it is a lot more serious than you might think.
All right, first up, we're heading to Nepal. This is a story about a massive infrastructure project that promised a brighter future. But, well, it delivered something else entirely.
So picture this. The plan was an $89 million hydroelectric project. It was backed by a huge loan from China's Exim Bank and was set to be built by a state-owned Chinese company. This thing was supposed to bring some much-needed power to the region. Sounds like a classic development story, right? A real win-win.
Yeah, not so much. After years of work, after all the lobbying for upgrades and more money, the project was only 30% complete. I mean, think about that. That's millions and millions of dollars spent for less than a third of a dam. So you got to ask, what on earth went wrong?
And this is where we get right to the heart of the problem. A local union secretary, a guy named Bhumananda Ariol, he just put it bluntly. He said it was all about vested interests. This wasn't about generating power for the people of Nepal. It was about lining the pockets of a select few. The project wasn't just failing by accident. You could almost say it was designed to be exploited from the start. Now, here's the thing. What happened in Nepal, it's not some isolated incident. Nope. It's actually part of a repeatable pattern, a kind of playbook for turning public projects into private profit. Let's break down exactly how it works. So, researchers actually have a name for the conditions that let this kind of thing happen. They call them governance gaps. Think of it like this. It's like having cracks in a country's foundation. It includes the obvious stuff, corruption, bad financial management. But there's a really critical one, a total lack of analysis into whether a project is even a good idea to begin with. These gaps, they create the absolute perfect opportunity for exploitation. So here's how this playbook is used, step by step. First, you find a country with those weak spots, those governance gaps. Step 2, you offer them a massive loan, but with very few conditions or safeguards. Step 3 is key. You use that loan to fund a project that might not even be necessary, or worse, isn't economically viable at all. And finally, step 4, when the project inevitably stalls or sails, the lenders and the contractors, they've already made their money. And the country, they're left with a mountain of debt and maybe a half-built dam.
And this whole playbook, it's not just for massive international projects. This pattern of exploiting public funds for private gain, it happens at all levels, all around the world.
Let's take the Philippines, for example. An anti-corruption group there investigated a nearly $3 million project. And you know what they found? Absolutely nothing. No reservoir, no dam, no irrigation system, just some abandoned equipment and an empty office building. The money was just gone. Or how about Kenya? Officials there literally created 18 fake contracts. Millions of dollars were paid out to companies that didn't even exist for security services that were completely fictional. I mean, it's a direct pipeline from the public treasury right into private pockets. Okay, so remember that question I asked at the beginning about the bottled water in Michigan? Here's where it all connects. In Michigan, the issue isn't a ghost reservoir, but it's the privatization of a public resource. As activist Liz Kirkwood puts it, private companies are making a fortune by taking publicly owned water, paying the state next to nothing for it, and then selling it back to all of us in bottles at a huge markup. It's the same fundamental idea, right? Exploiting public resources for private profit.
And this is the really infuriating part. This kind of high-level stuff, it doesn't just stay at the top. It trickles all the way down and poisons everyday life. A survey in Africa found that almost half of all households had paid a bribe just to deal with the police. A quarter of them had to pay a bribe to get justice from the courts. When the system is rotten at the top, you better believe everyone pays the price at the bottom.
So, okay, if this is happening all over the place, what's actually being done to stop it? And, maybe more importantly, who is truly footing the bill for all of this corruption? On paper, the fixes look pretty good. Countries set up anti-corruption commissions, they pass new laws to make government contracts more transparent, they even create acts to protect whistleblowers. But the reality? Well, it's a whole different story. These commissions are often totally underfunded, they're politically controlled, and they can't prosecute the big fish. The laws have loopholes you could drive a truck through, and they're barely enforced. A lot of the time, the so-called fixes are just for show.
And that right there, that gets us to the real cost. Because this isn't just about abstract numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about the communities that never get the electricity they were promised. It's about the farmers who never get the water for their crops. It's the cost to our environment when resources are plundered. And it's the cost to our society when people completely lose faith in their own institutions.
So, I guess the takeaway here is this. The next time you hear about some massive, multi-billion-dollar deal, it's worth taking a second to ask who really benefits from this. Because when public trust and public resources are put up for sale, the price tag is always far, far higher than any of us can afford.